It's 1803, and Ludwig von Beethoven is feverishly writing his Third Symphony. When he finishes, he dedicates the masterpiece to one man, Napoleon Bonaparte. To Beethoven and progressives across the continent, this French general was a hero. They believed he was marching across Europe to break the chains of the old monarchies and spread the ideals of equality. But just a year later, Beethoven violently scratched Napoleon's name off his manuscript. The ink tore straight through the paper in a fit of absolute rage. The champion of the people had just crowned himself emperor. How did a French public that had just bled to execute their own kings voluntarily surrender to a dictator? We have to figure out if this new ruler was actually a champion of the masses or simply a power-hungry villain. To understand his grip on France, we have to look at where he started, an island called Corsica. Growing up, Napoleon didn't even consider himself French. He saw them as hostile colonizers. Just before he was born in 1769, the Republic of Genoa, burdened by debt, essentially sold the island. They transferred ownership to France, instantly making the young Napoleon a second-class citizen in a foreign empire. But the outbreak of the French Revolution fractured the traditional military hierarchy. During a fierce siege in 1793, a 24-year-old Napoleon stepped into the power vacuum, took command of the artillery, and secured a stunning victory that earned him the rank of brigadier general. He wasn't tied down by traditional loyalties to the French crown. As an outsider, he could observe the chaos of a broken nation and exploit it, paving a clear path to absolute power. Early military successes in Italy built his reputation, but his 1798 campaign in Egypt was a disaster. The British Navy trapped his forces and decimated the French fleet. Napoleon quietly abandoned his dying army and fled back to Europe. Yet, he had planned for this risk by bringing along 160 scholars and scientists to document Egyptian history. These scientists unearthed something incredible: the Rosetta Stone, a slab that finally allowed researchers to decode ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. Back in France, Napoleon aggressively took control of the press. He bought newspapers, shut down critics, and commissioned massive paintings that depicted him not as a fleeing general, but as a fearless conqueror curing the sick. He realized that manufacturing a heroic public image was just as effective as actually winning a war. The facts didn't matter as long as he controlled the story. Riding high on this manufactured popularity, Napoleon orchestrated a coup in November 1799. Rather than ruling by the gun, he established a new consulate government, embedding his takeover within a legal constitution. This chart shows the reported approval ratings of his new constitution. His government announced that 99.9% of voters supported him. In reality, modern historians found that actual turnout was barely 50%, and millions of yes votes were completely fabricated. This updated timeline shows the exact same statistical fraud was repeated over the next few years. In 1802 and again in 1804, the government claimed an identical 99.9% approval rating to systematically elevate him to emperor for life. He dressed absolute tyranny in the clothing of a republic. These results weren't meant to reflect the will of the people. They were a tool to justify his grip on power to the rest of the world. When his armies first entered Italy, Napoleon told the local peasants he was there to break their chains. Yet, as he conquered territory, he installed his own brothers as puppet kings across Spain, Holland, and Germany. The original French Revolution had abolished slavery. In 1802, Napoleon passed laws to explicitly reinstate it across the empire's colonies. Back home, he stripped women of the political and divorce rights they had recently won, returning to a strictly patriarchal legal system, while actively exiling anyone who spoke out against him. His brand of liberation was a lie. It was raw imperialism, wrapped in revolutionary slogans, designed to prioritize total control over basic human rights. Look at the sheer scale of the French Empire on this map from 1812. His insatiable need to dominate Europe eventually pushed him too far. When Russia violated his economic blockade against Britain, Napoleon marched his massive army eastward. But the Russians refused to engage. They retreated and burned their own land, leaving nothing behind. Stranded in the brutal winter, Napoleon's grand army froze and starved in the snow. This devastating loss triggered a cascade of defeats. A massive European coalition pushed him into exile, and despite a brief, dramatic comeback, his forces were crushed for good at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. The same relentless ambition that pulled an outsider up to the throne completely blinded him to logistical reality, guaranteeing his own destruction. Millions died to feed his ego. Yet when the wars finally stopped, the administrative systems he built didn't just disappear. They became a blueprint for how a modern state functions. In 1804, he introduced the Napoleonic Code. This massive legal framework officially ended feudalism and cemented equality for men under the law. He secularized the government by stripping the church of its political power. He built a centralized public education system and constructed canals and fountains so Parisians would have reliable drinking water. To fund all of this, he eliminated noble tax exemptions and established the Banque de France, an institution that successfully crushed hyperinflation and stabilized the currency. Napoleon Bonaparte was a dictator. He spent decades drowning a continent in blood to secure his place in history. But in that pursuit of power, he built the legal and social machinery we still use today.